Hello and welcome to this lesson. We are in the GCSE PE Portal today and we are looking at responses to exercise. So by the end of this session, what should you know? Well, you should know a range of effects of exercise. Now within these, there are immediate, short-term and long-term effects. And hopefully, using some of the benefits and drawbacks that we're going to look at today, you should be able to explain why exercise causes these and the potential impacts that they might have on a performer or a coach in their training or progression. So we get started straight away by first defining the different categories of effects of exercise. And we have those which are immediate. These are the ones that occur in the moment. These are the ones happening in the exercise session. The ones that occur and then once exercise ceases, they will start to disappear and they'll go back to normal. Next, we have short-term effects. These are the ones that are in place following exercise for the next day or two. So 24, 36, maybe 24, 48, maybe a little bit longer. But these are the ones just following exercise. We might feel uncomfortable, but they'll go away eventually. And then we have our long-term effects. These are the ones that through persistent, regular training, the body will start to change. The body will start to adapt. It's not just responding in the moment. It's now actually catching up and adapting so that it can meet the demands of these exercise sessions better in the future going forward. So immediate, short-term and long-term. And the ones that we're going to look at today are the following: temperature increase and sweating, minute ventilation, cardiac output. We're then going to look at fatigue, dizziness, which is incumbent within that, nausea and DOMS. And then long term, we're going to look at body composition, improved fitness and bradycardia. So we get straight into it with our immediate effects of exercise, looking at the immediate, we're looking at the temperature increase, which sweating is part of that. So what happens? We start to exercise, and when we do, we start to require more energy in order to continue our moving. Where do we get that energy? From our aerobic and energy systems in place in our cells. Now, a byproduct of releasing energy from food for movement is heat. As a result, when we move more, we need more energy, therefore release more heat as a byproduct. This heat is absorbed in the surrounding tissues, be it the blood, the muscles, the skin, the bone, whatever it might be. As a result, overall global body temperature begins to increase. How do we cope with that? Well, we need to get that heat out. That's where sweating comes in, because the water inside of our body, mainly in our blood, absorbs some of this heat, and then the water is passed to the surface of our body, to our skin, and it's lost through sweat. It might fall off, we might touch a surface and it might slide off, we might radiate heat out, but if we're talking just sweat, water absorbs the heat inside of the body, goes to the exterior surface, the skin, and then it's lost in the form of sweat droplets. How else do we see this rise in temperature occurring? Well, it's inside of our joints, in our muscles, in our equipment. Wherever there's two surfaces, be it ligament on ligament, or t-shirt on skin, or muscle fiber on muscle fiber. Where there's two surfaces and there's movement and there's a little bit of force, we have friction. And friction generates heat. So just by moving more, we've got higher energy demands, producing heat as a byproduct. And by moving more, we have more friction, generating more heat. Where does that heat go? Into the surrounding tissue, into the body water stores, which is lost through sweat. Now, what are some benefits of this? Well, first of all, it improves the muscle's pliability. A warmer muscle can be stretched further. It becomes more pliable. Warmer blood vessels can also dilate, which means to get bigger. So instead of just carrying through a normal amount of blood, because they're now bigger, more blood can pass through the vessels that warm up. Now, the vessels in the working muscles are likely to experience the highest temperature increases, therefore they're most likely to dilate the most, so we'll start providing larger quantities of blood to the muscles that are actually working. That's good. But what are some drawbacks? Well, if we exercise for too long, in too high temperatures, and we do start to lose too much water, then we won't be able to lose additional temperature increases as easily. If our water stores get lower, we lose the ability to lose heat through sweat. So all of our body will start to increase, at which point chemical reactions such as aerobic and anaerobic energy respiration, they won't occur as well. So we'll get too hot to continue to release energy to continue our movement. And that is our first immediate effect of exercise. Our temperature increase, which can lead to sweating, caused by energy, or the byproduct of heat through energy release, as well as friction between equipment, joints, and other tissues and structures. Second effect, I should say, is increased minute ventilation. First of all, what is minute ventilation? Well, it is tidal volume multiplied by our breathing rate. It's how much we breathe per breath multiplied by how many of those breaths we take in a minute. When we start to exercise, we see an increase in minute ventilation. Why? How does this occur? Well, our body starts to change. And as it starts to change with its movements, with its temperatures, with its stresses, with its tension, our brain picks up those messages. It then sends a message of its own to our respiratory muscles, our diaphragm, our intercostals, our abdominals, and we start to increase the frequency of our breaths and increase the depth of our breaths as well. So we breathe more in and breathe more out per breath, and we do that more frequently each minute. And you can see that there with this little bit of a graph on the right-hand side. So these numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 litres of air per minute, or no, half a litre, litres per breath. So we're dealing with sort of 300, 400, 500 millilitres at rest. Then when we start to increase, we see these longer lines, these longer waves. This represents 1, 2, 2.5 litres of air entering our lungs each breath. And what we would see eventually is that these peaks would get closer and closer and closer, representing faster breathing rates. And if we can increase both of those things, minute ventilation goes up. Benefits. Why is that good for us? Well, it means we're getting more air into our lungs every single minute. And if we can get more air into our lungs every single minute, we stand more of a chance to take more oxygen out to then transport around our body to satisfy aerobic energy respiration. If we get lots of oxygen in and we can continue to respire aerobically, then we can avoid anaerobic respiration. And we don't really want anaerobic respiration for too much of our exercise because lactic acid is being produced, and that slows down energy production. It makes our muscles feel sore and heavy and tired, so we don't want that. Some drawbacks. Well, I've just mentioned 3 muscles involved with increasing minute ventilation. Our diaphragms, our abdominals, our intercostals. We've also got our sternocleidomastoids. We've also got our scalenes. We've also got our pectoral minors. These muscles are now working harder. What the muscles require if they work harder? More energy, more oxygen. They start to produce CO2 or perhaps lactic acid. So by increasing our minute ventilation, we have muscles working harder to do that. So we need to increase minute ventilation even further to supply the harder working muscles with enough oxygen and energy, which we've got here. So contracting respiratory muscles add to the increasing energy demands. This note here, this time delay, it's the same with cardiac output, which we'll discuss in a moment. But when we start to exercise, the process of the body detecting stress and change and then sending out the messages to respond, that takes a bit of time. In that window, that's where oxygen deficit, oxygen debt can occur. Think back to your EPOC lesson that we've looked at before. That's that window of time where we have to rely on anaerobic energy production instead of aerobic energy production, and we end up with lactic acid being produced, which is not what we want. So there we go, increased minute ventilation. And lastly, for the immediate effects, like I said, we have cardiac output increasing as well. Very similar to the minute ventilation in terms of formula. We've got the volume of blood per contraction, stroke volume, multiplied by the frequency of those contractions per minute, heart rate. Stroke volume multiplied by heart rate equals cardiac output. Now this graph here, we can see, this is just using heart rate. This gradual rise from resting levels, a little bit of adrenaline kicking in here, then the load starts. Exercise starts, we've got this upward curve until it plateaus because it's matched the energy demands. But this increase from resting levels to our increasing and then our peak cardiac output, that is our immediate effect of exercise in our cardiovascular system. Why? Why is it a good thing? Well, the benefits are we get more blood being passed around our body per minute, and hopefully inside that blood we've got more oxygen. So more oxygen is being delivered to the working muscles. Not only that, because the blood is visiting the muscles that are working, it can start to pick up some of the carbon dioxide that's being produced, taking it back to the lungs, ready for exhalation. So we can get rid of CO2, we can increase O2 delivery, so we can satisfy higher demands for aerobic energy systems. Some drawbacks. There aren't many. There aren't really. Obviously, we have the cardiac muscle, which requires some energy, but it's not going to be, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a very big muscle. But we've got that time delay again. We've got that lag between starting to exercise, our brain noticing that we're exercising, and then sending its messages to its cardiovascular system. And in that time delay, we're not matching energy demands. Therefore, we rely on anaerobic energy systems, producing the lactic acid, fatiguing us sooner. And that is that with immediate effects. We had our temperature increase and sweating, then our minute ventilation and our cardiac output increasing. Next, we are going to look at the short-term effects. So these short-term effects, these are the ones that might last from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 hours after the session, right the way through to 3 or 4 days. So short-term effects of exercise. First one we have is fatigue. So this chap here, he's obviously a little bit tired. It looks like he's almost in a warm-up pre-game and he's looking quite tired, which doesn't bode well for his performance. But it can be experienced physically or mentally. Fitness levels and performance may be suboptimal on the days after intense exercise, so the fatigue might roll over. And a person might turn up to their next training session feeling tired, feeling off par or under par, not feeling quite right, maybe 60, 70, 80% of their normal capacity. Mentally intensive exercise can also require the brain to undergo periods of less stimulation. Fast-paced, open environment, racket sports, team sports, these require fast decision-making skills. They require strategic thinking and planning. All of that can place stress on the brain, and it might need a few days off to just recover and recuperate. So how might this feel? Well, we spoke about dizziness being a short-term effect of exercise as well. Well, slower thought processing can cause that. Lightheadedness, confusion. If a brain has been stressed and is now in a state of recovery, and then it gets stressed again in the next training session, it hasn't been given that time to recover, then it's going to be functioning suboptimally. And how does that look? Poor decisions, slow thinking. The body, or that's a little bit more easier to see, you're going to be slower, you're going to be weaker, you're going to be less coordinated. You might be yawning. What are some benefits of fatigue? Because yes, it's not going to be good for performance on the day, but why is it good to actually note that you're experiencing fatigue? Well, it can act as a signal to a performer, to a coach, that you are tired. You worked hard, well done. But now it's time to take a step back. Now it's time to have some time off. Don't train again just yet. Give yourself time to recover. But if it's ignored, this is where the drawbacks start to come in. Poor decisions might start to be made, which could pose risk depending on the environment, the playing style, the exercise session. A rugby player or an American football player, for example, making poor decisions that could end with injury, both to themselves or other people. And then obviously with recovery. If a person is feeling fatigued and feeling tired and they don't give their body that time off, then when is hypertrophy going to occur? When is their brain going to get back to normal operating levels? If a body isn't given that time to adjust and adapt and to reap the benefits, then the benefits won't be reaped. They'll just stay in that suppressed state, and the next exercise session is just going to batter the bodily systems down further still. And that's when injury dehydration, malnourishment, exhaustion, overtraining can start to creep in. Next, we have nausea, linked in part to dizziness and lightheadedness that we just spoke about there with fatigue. But I'm going to talk more specifically here about actual vomiting, getting sick. You are unwell as a result of exercise and training. Well, why does it occur, first of all? Well, when we exercise, we're placing stress on the body. We're putting tension, or we're putting the body under tension. We're putting it through force. We're putting it through different positions. We're requiring the cardiorespiratory system to respond in all sorts of manner. Well, an impact of that could be that the digestive system or other systems in the body, for example, the endocrine system, the digestive system, suddenly we might start to get imbalances or mixed signals from the brain to these systems and organs, and we might start to get fluctuating blood supply, energy supply, nutrient supply. So the organs and other systems, aside from cardiorespiratory, muscular, skeletal, they might start to experience strange levels of oxygen, CO2, nutrients, blood, energy. As a result, they can't function properly. So a side effect might be that the stomach gets rid of its contents. A vomit might occur. Getting sick might occur. Now, what's the drawbacks of this? Fairly obvious, but you're losing your food. You're losing your macronutrients, your micronutrients, your minerals, your water that you've been consuming, you've now lost. Now, if you've just completed an exercise session and then you get sick, your body's in a place of disrepair, and you've now got no nutrients or a lack of nutrients to put it back, to put it right, to repair it. So that might hinder the recovery process into the coming days. Now, benefits. Are there any benefits? Well, it might act as a signal for the performer or the coach. It might tell them something in the nutrition plan didn't work. They might be allergic, or they might be having a reaction to something, or eating too much or too little led to bouts of vomiting or sickness, or making them feel unwell, suboptimal. So they can then start to change that nutritional plan so it doesn't happen again in the future. It might also mean that it tells the performer, the coach, that they're working too hard. If you're working so hard that you're feeling sick at the end, should you be pushing yourself that hard? Maybe not. So dial it back a little bit and just build up in increments to the level that did make someone sick. Another negative, which I didn't touch on, but I'll go back to it now, are for the young or novice performers. Let's say that this is the first time you are doing this form of exercise, this sport, whatever it might be. It's highly likely that it's going to be brand new to your body. Therefore, the causes are more likely to occur. This disruption, this imbalance, this unknown environment for the brain to try and respond to, nausea, dizziness, vomiting, lightheadedness can all occur. Now, if you're young or a novice performer, you probably not want to go back and repeat this experience. So it's negatively associating exercise with illness. So it might deter them from future participation, which is not a good thing. But that is that for short-term effects of exercise. We've got nausea, we had DOMS, which we'll come on to now, and we had our fatigue as the first one as well. So last one, we've got DOMS, delayed onset of muscle soreness. Well, first of all, what is it? Well, it's when the muscle feels sore, it feels inflamed, it might feel tight. We don't want to be doing too much the following days after exercise if we've got delayed onset of muscle soreness. I've put this meme here, can't walk upstairs, legs too sore. Very prevalent in leg workouts. That's probably why a lot of people skip leg day, because they're larger muscle groups and they experience DOMS in the greatest quantity, you could say. And we use our legs all the time. We can sort of avoid the use of our deltoids, but if you're walking around, you can't quite avoid the use of your quads, your hams, your glutes, and your gastrocnemius. So what causes it? Well, through exercise, through overload, through tension, through stress, the muscle fibers can be ripped or torn ever so slightly. Now, when that happens, nutrients, protein, blood, oxygen, arrive at the site to start the repair process. But if the rip or the tear happens on too large a scale, so it's too big, or there's too many in the same place, this flood of nutrients can cause swelling or inflammation. So suddenly the fibers can't move as well, hence the tightness. And this extra stuff in the space presses outwards. It expands the fiber, which can make it feel tender. And it starts to press on nearby pain receptors. So it feels sore, it feels tight, it feels tender. Why is it a bad thing? Well, it's uncomfortable. First of all, you're less likely to want to train in the future in that manner if you know you felt like that in the first place. In that same training week, you might be deterred from training anymore. If you still feel sore in your legs or your arms or your body, you're not going to want to go and train again because you're still, in pain from an exercise session that happened before. A downside is that anaerobic exercise will also cause the production of lactic acid. So we've now got not just these torn muscles, but because we've exercised in a way that's torn muscles, we're probably going fast, going hard, powerful. We're probably working anaerobically. And we know that a byproduct of anaerobic energy is lactic acid. So lactic acid can sort of be left, sort of residual lactic acid left over in the muscle, not feeling good, leading to poor enzyme activity, leading to slowness, heaviness, perhaps burning sensations inside of our muscle. So not very good for motivating us to train again soon after this session. But DOMS could be seen as a good thing. Why? Because it's an indicator that that exercise session stressed the muscle. Now, I'm not saying that a training session and then 4 days of DOMS is good, because that's 4 days of not training. But it can tell us that whatever we did, it overloaded our body in a new way, and it caused some fibers to stretch, to tear, to rupture, to rip, whatever it is on a micro scale. So now we've got something to get better. We've got something to improve upon. We've got something to put back together in a way that it's better than it was before exercise. So we can progress. You could argue if you're training and you don't experience at least some form of DOMS, then your muscle wasn't overloaded, therefore there's nothing to improve. Now, there's a whole load of theory in those, but research would also argue that not experiencing DOMS or avoiding DOMS, you can still see progression, but it's just an idea. DOMS can indicate that you are overloaded, which means that there's now something to put back together, which means you can improve. But too much DOMS, you start to lose out on the benefits. Yes, you can put your muscles back together, but you miss out on 4 days of training. So which one's better, which one's worse? And that is that for short-term effects of exercise. So we looked at, what was the first one? Fatigue was the first one. Then we went into our nausea, and then we went into our DOMS, which leads us into our final category, which are the longer-term effects of exercise, or the adaptations of our body to exercise. And the first one is our body composition. Now, body composition is the components that make up our body mass. And in the context of sport and performance, we're mainly concerned with 3, arguably 2. We've got our bones, our muscles, and our fat mass. Yes, there's organs, yes, there's blood, yes, there's other tissue, but we're primarily concerned with bone, muscle, and fat. Now, from the perspective of an adult body doesn't change, well, their skeletal system doesn't change on a day-to-day basis. Maybe very, very tiny, but nowhere near enough for us to be concerned. Over the course of decades, the density of bone might start to change going into old age, but we can rule that one out for long-term effects of exercise for this lesson. We're mainly concerned about muscle mass and fat mass. And exercise can promote the production of new muscle mass and the reduction of fat mass. Now that is, for a lot of people, the goal. For a lot of sports, that would be beneficial. There are some where retaining fat mass can also prove beneficial, perhaps a rugby forward who needs a higher body mass to put into a scrum or into a weight or a tackle or whatever it is. But ideally, we want more muscle mass and less fat mass. This could cause the body shape to change. There's going to be muscles sticking out or creating shapes on the body that weren't there before. Fat mass dropping off is going to reveal the shape of the skeleton or the muscles that were below it originally. So a person's body shape and appearance might start to change, which in turn can start to alter a person's own body image, their own confidence, their own self-esteem. They might prefer how they look, therefore feel more confident in their skin, in their body, which is a good thing. But the opposite is also true. If non-exercise occurs over too long a period of time, then the muscles aren't being used, therefore they reduce in size and capacity and capability until they get to the size that suits the demands of non-exercise. So if a person but if a person sits all day and then sit down all night, and then they drive to work and then sit down and then drive home and then sit down, if they're not doing any exercise, then the muscles will just adapt so that it can match those demands. So muscle mass might start to come down. If nutrition doesn't change and that person is over-consuming energy, then any excess will begin to be stored as fat mass around the body. So now we'll start to see muscle mass reducing and fat mass increasing. Whereas exercise, typically, when combined with good nutrition, we get more muscle mass and less fat mass. What impact can that have? Well, the opposite of body confidence and self-esteem that could come with improving body compositions. Now, the former promotes overall health, vitality, and life expectancy. More muscle, less fat. We can move better, and there's less strain on our bodily systems from carrying around this ineffective mass of fat. It's like going out now with a rucksack on, and in that rucksack you've got, weights, 2 kilos of water in your backpack. That's going to weigh you down. Your muscles are going to have to work harder to carry that around. The fat mass that you have and I have at the moment, our muscles, which we do have, are working harder than they need to just to carry around the fat that we have on our body. I'm not saying fat isn't good. We need some fat in our body for absorption of minerals, for energy supply, for heat, for protection. There's purposes for it, but we don't need too much. And as soon as we start to pack on a few more pounds of fat, our muscles have to work harder, our joints are working harder, our heart is working harder, our blood vessels are working harder all the time. And eventually they're going to become so strained that damage occurs. Issues start to happen and occur. So we don't want that. But if we can improve body composition, then we can improve life expectancy. We can improve overall vitality and energy levels and movement quality. And then mentally, we might be able to improve our self-esteem because we feel better about how we look, feel, and move. Now, going too far is also an issue. It's called body dysmorphia. You don't need to know about this for your exam, but it might be worth looking into just a little bit. But body dysmorphia is where people get too obsessed with too much muscle and too little fat. And suddenly they perceive their body to look differently than what it actually does, and it can lead to eating disorders, overtraining, all sorts. But we don't need to cover that in detail for this, but maybe something to go off and do a little bit of research yourself. So that's our first long-term effect of exercise, body composition. Next, we have health and fitness. Now, we're going to start off with health. It's the complete state of physical, social, mental, emotional well-being. It's not just not being ill, not having disease. Okay, it's this all-round well-being in these 4 states. And exercise or sport can develop all 4 of these areas. Mentally, a person needs to learn how to discipline themselves, how to think clearly, strategically, how to think quickly, how to set goals and strive towards them. Very good for the mental game. Socially, if a person turns up to a sport or a team or an exercise session, then they're probably going to be interacting with lots of people with a similar interest of their own. So they're more likely to develop stronger friendships or relationships. I'll put this image here of CrossFit. It's renowned for the community within it. Yes, it's got lots of sports and competitions and impressive feats. But I would say the standout feature of that form of exercise and sport is the community. People are going to a session as a team almost, and supporting everyone in their own personal journeys. Even though they're not actually a team going towards the same goal, they know that everyone is an individual going to their own individual goals, but everyone is supportive of each other. Emotionally, well, in sport, in exercise, you might have to learn to deal with winning, losing, frustration, elation, stress, risk, reward, any other emotion you can think of, happiness, anger, sadness, depression. They can all come out in exercise. Not in every single session, maybe. If it's like a World Cup final or something, a person or the fans might go through a whole range of these emotions. But it puts the person into a situation that they have to confront the emotion and they have to develop the skill set, the tools to deal with this emotion and move forward in the future. And then the physical side of things. Well, exercise can develop the muscular system. It can develop the skeletal, the energy, the cardio. It can develop all of the systems that we require for vitality. Muscles can get stronger. Tendons, ligaments, they become more fibrous, keeping joints in better condition. Skeletal system. The bones can become more dense, less prone to snapping or osteoarthritis or osteoporosis. Our energy systems can become better. The enzymes more responsive so we can get more energy out of the food that we eat more efficiently, sooner into exercise. So we can work harder, sooner into exercise, for longer, without fatigue. And then our cardiorespiratory system. Now, we've already spoken about minute ventilation and cardiac output. And we've spoken about the muscles and the systems in place to achieve those short or immediate effects. Well, if we cause those effects on a daily or bi-daily basis, then eventually they're going to get better as well. They're going to experience stress. The body's going to go in and it's going to repair them and make them a little bit better than they were before. And gradually, they're going to get better. We're going to have a few more alveoli, some more capillaries. So now when we breathe in air, there's more opportunity for oxygen to come out of the alveoli, into the capillary, into the blood, and around to the working muscles. We can increase our VO2 max, the volume of oxygen that we can breathe in, diffuse, transport, and utilize around the body. So, physical and mental developments. Good for health, but now specifically fitness. We think about the different components of fitness that we have. Speed, strength, flexibility, power. The raw ones that just require the bodily systems, the muscular system, the skeletal system. They're obviously going to improve with muscular hypertrophy. But the ones which are more skill orientated, where we have coordination, reaction time, we're also going to see an improvement in those because the brain's getting better. The psychology of a person is improving mentally, socially, emotionally. And the physiology of a person is improving. Muscles, skeleton, heart, lungs. So combine the two, psycho and physio, we can tackle every single component of fitness. So with persistent, regular exercise, the body will begin to improve across most, if not all, components of fitness, so long as the exercise session targets each of those components and stresses and overloads them accordingly. But that is one long-term effect of exercise, the benefits, the development of improved health in all four categories and better fitness, be it the physical components or skill-related components. And lastly, we have got bradycardia. Now, bradycardia, I'll start off with the definition. I've written it down, I think, at the end of this slide. Bradycardia is when at rest, your heart can contract fewer than 60 beats per minute and still satisfy blood demands around the body. Why does this happen? Well, exercise, we know, causes the brain to increase the contractility of the heart. It needs to be harder, it needs to be faster in order to respond to these increasing energy demands. Well, the side effect of this increased blood flow coming into the heart on a regular occurrence, be it every day, every couple of days, a few times a week, this heart is going to be stretched and expanded because cardiac output is going up. More blood's being forced into these chambers of the heart, so these chambers eventually stay a little bit stretched, a little bit expanded, a little bit more pliable. And when we contract the heart, not only have we got a bigger chamber now because they've been stretched ever so slightly, but because we contract them regularly, we've got the cardiac muscle surrounding the heart. It's still a muscle, cardiac muscle. So hypertrophy can still occur. And if we contract the heart on a regular basis above resting levels, perhaps even towards maximum heart rate, then that heart muscle is going to be stressed. It's going to be overloaded. How does the body respond? By making it bigger, by making it stronger, by making it thicker, so that it becomes stronger. It's able to beat harder for longer without fatiguing. So we've now got a bigger muscle with thicker walls of muscle around it, with more space inside of it. There's more volume for blood to enter into, so that our stroke volume can increase. Because if we've got a bigger volume with more blood in, and we've got bigger muscles to crush it, to empty it more so, more blood's going to leave per beat. So then, if we start to think about at rest, where we still have, we always have energy demands around our body. And at the moment, for the untrained or okay trained athlete, a resting heart rate might be about 70 to 80 beats per minute. Untrained and unhealthy, maybe 80 to 90. But trained, we're starting to go below 60 beats per minute. Enough blood is ejected per stroke that the heart only needs to beat 50 to 60 times per minute to satisfy the energy demands around the body, which is bradycardia. It's an indicator of healthy heart. We've got high quality cardiac muscle and a large capacity inside of it to eject blood from. How does this affect sport? Well, if we can achieve bradycardia, that means we've got a higher ceiling to increase into when talking about energy demands. So now when we start to move and exercise, we can work harder at a higher intensity for longer, demand more blood, and our heart is able to match that. It's able to beat its maximum rate, but more per beat. It's a better muscle, it's a better system. And if we can increase our cardiac output over time, then that increased cardiac output will be able to satisfy increased energy demands around the body. We can work harder, we can work faster, we can work for longer. Which leads us on to the activity. Now, if you are in the PE portal, fantastic. Just access your activity sheet and you can be completing that to solidify your understanding. If you're not currently in the PE portal, then what you can do is go to GCSE PE Portal.com or thepetutor.com, and you can find out lots of information about getting yourself involved with the portal, and then you can have this activity sheet as well. There's also flashcards, quiz questions, the mini lesson to review as well to help sort of secure all of the understanding. But hopefully after this lesson, you now know a range of effective exercise, of which they're immediate, short-term and long-term. And hopefully, because of the benefits and the drawbacks that we've been looking at, you can explain why exercise causes some of these effects, the implications of them to a performer in the short term, in the long term, the positive and the negative. And that is that. So it was a lesson on the responses to exercise, the immediate, the short term and the long term. I hope you found it useful. If you did, then like this video if you are able to. If you're in the portal, then obviously go ahead and access your activity sheets, flashcards, lessons and quiz questions to further solidify your understanding. But hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.